John Shuttleworth. I'm a pilot with the Liberty Foundation. The Liberty Foundation operates World War II airplanes, and we have an educational focus. So our goal is to take significant World War II airplanes around the country and introduce them to people, share them, and at the same time have the opportunity to talk about the history of the airplane and have an educational outreach with our effort. Anybody can come fly with us. We take any age. We do about a 30-minute ride, and we load people in. They are in their seat for only takeoff and landing, and literally when the wheels break the ground, they can get up out of their seats and go to every station in the airplane and go around and see what the waist gunners did, what was up in the radio room. They can walk across the catwalk in the bomb bay and see the bombs, come up onto the flight deck and see the cockpit, and then go down between the pilot and co-pilot seats up to the navigator and bombardier position and see that amazingly gorgeous view of the glass nose as we fly across the countryside at 1,000 or 1,200 feet. And it's just a magical experience. So anybody can come and enjoy the smells and the sounds of a B-17. The airplane, around $5,000 an hour to operate. The seats are kind of expensive, $450 for a 30-minute flight in the airplane. And all of that money goes to support the airplane, restore it, maintain it, keep it going. All of us are volunteers here with the Liberty Foundation. And we just do it to keep the airplane alive, because too many airplanes go to museums and they sit in a dark hangar and are never shared again, never get to go out and fly. And so we think it's special that we get the opportunity to operate one of these and share the airplane so people can enjoy it. Or even if you can't take a ride, come out to the airport, see the airplane. When we're done with ride operations, we open it up for ground tours, and you can walk through the airplane and see it and talk to people about the history. We have about 6 captains and about 12 co-pilots that fly with us, and we rotate out and we bid different weekends and what have you. In this airplane, there's no automation, so you do everything. In some of the more modern airplanes, like at takeoff, they have a range on the throttle quadrant where you just move the lever and then the fuel controller takes over and sets power, and you don't even have to really look at it. But in this airplane, you have to do everything. So there's no automation. And then secondly is it's a tail dragger, so that makes it a more difficult airplane because the center of gravity of the airplane is behind the main wheels and is always wanting to swap ends. So you have to manage the airplane with the rudder pedals and keeping it straight. It's a little more difficult than a tricycle gear airplane to land. And then lastly, it has that huge vertical stabilizer. This airplane really wants to weather vane into a crosswind, and so when that happens, if the wind is so strong that you run out of control effectiveness with the surfaces, then you have to start bringing in throttles to hold the airplane straight. So it really is a fun experience to fly because you're using your feet and your hands, and it's just a hoot to fly. A lot of personality in this airplane. I do this for a couple of different reasons. One is the pilot side of me likes flying these old airplanes that really has a personality, where some of the more modern equipment is more push button and doesn't have much of a personality. They're just neat to fly. So I do it because I have an interest from a pilot perspective, but then the thing that really brings a lot of joy is sharing the airplanes, and whether it be sharing it with a child or a young adult who doesn't know much about World War II, and you see them light up with some understanding about what went on, or they are energized to learn more about it. That's fun. Sharing the history about what really happened with a son or a daughter of a veteran, and they understand maybe why their parent didn't, or their father didn't want to talk about his experiences, and lights come on for them and they understand it. But the thing that really chokes you up is I get the opportunity many times to be the catalyst that gets a grandfather or a father to speak to his kids or his grandchildren about what happened. And he didn't do it before because it was so traumatizing, but he sees the airplane and the memories and the emotions come back, and then he's willing to share it with them. And when you get a chance to do that, it's an amazing feeling. Today we had a great opportunity to hear a first-hand account from a World War II veteran. We have the opportunity, this is a focal point, a nucleus for that to happen, for people to come and hear a first-hand history of what happened during World War II. And so that's our educational mission combined with our efforts to support and to provide the airplane for people to ride. People can go to the website, find out about us, and come out to be with the airplane and take a tour, walk through it, and help us with cleaning it and maintaining it. We welcome people to come out and be around it. It's here to be shared. Here is one of the aspects of a G model. This is the last model of B-17, and one of the things that was added was this chin turret because the F model didn't have this, and the Germans quickly figured out that they could do a gunnery run from the front on the B-17, and it was the least protected area. So that chin turret was added. The bombardier would sit right here. When he wasn't bombing, he had a pendant and would control these guns. The cheek guns were on all B-17s, and the navigator came forward from his navigation station and would man back and forth on these two cheek guns. This particular engine, these inboard engines, have an inertial starter, which is like they had during World War II, where you'd wind up the flyweight and then engage a clutch just for the starter to start. This is the turbocharger right here. So exhaust gases turn this turbine. Here's the exhaust coming back to spool up the turbine. There's a waste gate here on the exhaust that when the waste gate closes and stops bypassing, it is forced across the turbine and spins the turbine up to compress air. So on the bottom side you have the turbine, on the top side of the shaft you have the compressor, and that would compress air into the induction manifold to give you about 10 pounds of boost. All of the control surfaces on a B-17 are fabric. And that is because they're easy to repair. A metal surface has to be balanced. So when these would come back and be all shot full of holes, they'd go out with dope, which is the kind of the adhesive, and little patches of fabric, and they'd dope them up and slap a patch on and off it could go. One thing that's bad about fabric is it's flammable. So you take a tracer round through the aileron or the elevator or the rudder, part of it's going to burn. Of course, everybody's familiar with the ball turret. This is the ball turret station where usually the shortest crew member became the ball turret gunner. It didn't matter if you came to the crew as a waist gunner or as a top turret gunner. Usually the shortest guy became the ball turret gunner. All of the guns on the B-17 are 50 caliber. It had a complement of 13 guns. Back here is the tail gunner position. You see this little door here under the horizontal stabilizer. It's usually where the tail gunner would go in after the tail wheel, and then he'd be back here for usually the entirety of the flight. And this is called the Cheyenne tail. This is the later style of gunnery station and tail that was on the B-17, and these were all put on in Cheyenne, Wyoming. So the airplanes would leave Boeing up in Seattle, go to Cheyenne, have these tails put on, and then head overseas. So that's the bailout hatch in the radio room, and we typically operate with that out because the fuselage is stiflingly hot. So that provides some airflow through the fuselage and keeps it nice and inside. And it's a gorgeous view. When we're out flying around, you can stand there like that gentleman is. And you gotta watch your hat and your glasses and your cameras and stuff. You know, we litter a lot of that across the countryside, but it's a gorgeous view, and it's a lot of fun to sit there and look out and see the countryside go by. Here's another improvement of the G model. In the F model airplane, the two gunners were side by the same location in the tail, bump into each other as they were shooting. In this case, in the G model, they staggered the guns so that the guys could move around much easier when they're shooting. That's the business end of the 50 caliber. And this big cylinder behind me. This is an oxygen cylinder. The crew back here had little bottles they strapped to themselves, and they would top it off from this. So what they would do in combat is the ball turret gunner would not get in there on departure, obviously. So they started getting near where they thought they might start to see fighters. They would rotate that so the guns were pointed down, open the hatch. Ball turret gunner would take off his parachute, get in there, and they'd lock him in. And then he was in there until they got him out. Okay, this room would have been completely full of radios. It would have been operated by the radio operator, who was also a gunner. So he would have had a gun that would have been out of the top, one single 50 cal here. And he would have been responsible for pretty much all the radio communications, as well as defending against anything coming from above. He also had, there was a lot of control systems that would have actually been under the floor here, like the turbo controllers and stuff like that. In addition, there was actually, for the cameras, or for the B-17s that were equipped, they actually have what looks like a mini bomb bay door under the radio floor that is for a camera well that they would open and use for aerial photography. If you heard that go off, get out. That was your Belle out, Belle. So here we have the bomb bays. So you would have had, there's outer racks on both sides, and then there's also inner racks here, so it's very tight to get through here. These would have been tons of bombs in here. Just depends on the mission and the target that they were going to, whether they would have 100 pounds, 250s, 500, 750s, 1,000 or 2,000 pound bombs. And obviously you have logistics. You know, you could get several 1,000 pound bombs in here, but when you start trying to put 40, 100 bombs in here, 100 pound bombs, you just have a logistic hookup. Where can you hook them all up and get them all spaced accordingly? So it really depended. Everyone always says, how many bombs does it carry? Well, it's an open-ended question, so this would represent, basically these are representative of a 500 pound bomb, and we got basically 2 on each side here, but these things typically, on average, a mission would have been somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 pounds worth of bombs in whatever configuration, whether they were general purpose or cluster bombs or fire bombs or something like that. So, pilot would have been in the left seat right here, and then the co-pilot would have been over here. Everything in this airplane is manual controlled, fly-by-wire, and when I say fly-by-wire, I don't mean what modern version of that. Literally, there's a cable connected to everything that runs to a control surface, an engine control throttle, whatever. Everything in here is running by cables running out to the wings, out to the tail. So these guys are very physically having to manhandle this airplane to fly it. It's not bad to fly, but it is a very heavy airplane to fly, as you might imagine. And you know, for 8, 10, 12 hours at a time to stay in these tight formations, these pilots, it was very exhausting for them. The only 2 things on this airplane that are hydraulic are the cowl flaps and the brakes, but everything else is either an electric motor or it is manpower. So this would have been where the entire top turret would have been here. We've taken it out just for ease of passenger rides, but the top turret flight engineer would have basically stood inside this turret that would have rotated right here. And he would have been firing his 250 cals from basically inside the cockpit. So you can imagine in such a confined space that it was incredibly loud when they would fire off their fire off the 50s in the turret. But he could rotate all the way around, and he was also responsible for, he was basically the onboard mechanic. So in the event anything went wrong with the airplane, he was basically the first line of defense to try to figure it out in flight and get the airplane. And he would also assist both pilots in the event that they had an issue and he needed to run the prop controls or throttles or any of that. So he was basically kind of a backup pilot in a way. Obviously not qualified to fly, but he was, you know, in the event of an emergency, he was your guy.